If you had $100,000 coming in passively, now if you go to work for it, that doesn't count. Got to remove that from the equation. But if you had $100,000 coming in passively, which is either income properties like we're talking about, or businesses that you invested in that you don't work in, then you're out of the rat race. That's like the game. So my kids are in private school, so my number was above that. But the point being is that I would look at each income property that I purchased as getting closer and closer and closer to getting out of the rat race. And this was me in my, let's call it probably a little bit younger than you, 30 to 35, range. 30, in that ballpark range. And that's what I was doing, each one. But I will say, buying a lot of those properties, each one came with its own set of hurdles. And I found that later on that buying bigger properties actually was easier, not harder, because you're able to afford to bring professionals in to do a lot of the things.
Yes. Let's unpack some of this. So my brain works a lot of times with timelines. I actually want to kind of go back to almost the very beginning because I think one of the fascinating things is building a business, and you kind of skip from saying, hey, I was a not great chiropractor to, oh my gosh, I have 10
you made the
10
business part easy look easy.
I think if you were in front of a chiropractor audience, you'd be in the top 0.1% of number of chiropractic, sort of practices that you had, or locations, or whatever businesses, whatever you call them. Give us a quick kind of 2-minute overview of how you scaled that, and how long did that take?
Quickly, I was working very hard at that time, and I was just, I came out of school 26 years old. A lot of my friends had not gone to professional school and had started making money 4 or 5 years earlier than I did. And even when I graduated the first year, you're an intern, it's like slave labor. You're being paid nothing. So I was 5 years, what I call behind. So there's a feeling that I had. And so I came out of the gates hot. I was hot. And I was just a working machine. I would get up before the clinic's hours were 9 to 1. I would get up at like 6 and be on the road marketing. And I would go to anything that could drive business I had only one clinic, remember, at that time. This was year 1, month 1. And I didn't buy I started a clinic. So I was just doing everything I could. I had a radio show, not that dissimilar than this. And I would go from my office, I would be able to remote broadcast into AM radio because I couldn't afford FM anything, you know what I mean? And so I'd be on these stations that had mostly audiences that were either older, which had aches and pains that see chiropractors, or cater to immigrants, or that didn't, and I would bring on a Spanish speaking person that would talk to them in their language and be able to. And so what happened was, once I became, what's the word, I guess trusted, I would be probably the best word, people would come to me for not just their chiropractic or medical reasons, but my cousin needs this, and I would be able to refer it to an attorney that did that. And
awesome.
And I became sort of like a network within myself. And so by doing
it's like hub and spoke in a network, and you were the hub. And
so we would do. We ended up creating a show, an actual show where we had a Spanish-speaking guy. His name was David Bernstein. Okay, whose daughter Michelle Bernstein is a very famous chef in Miami. Okay. But he was a Jewish fellow that also spoke Spanish because his wife was Spanish, and he would do the show on behalf of us. That would sort of be. It was called Don David, like Don Corleone from like a sign of respect. He was an older man. And if you had any problem, you called Don David. And Don David would take the phone call. We'd take all the incoming calls, and we would parcel them out to different attorneys to help them, and different people to help them with whatever it is. Needed a mortgage, we'd go to a mortgage company and ask them to contribute to our budget. So we were doing this advertising, and it was just bringing in all these people.
Awesome.
And then as a result of that, when you're sending people to whoever, they're sending them back. And it became this quid pro quo. Reciprocity.
Yeah.
Sure. And even though it's a big world, it actually is a small world when you get into the business side of things. And,
sure.
And, when you're busy, I would say the term success begets success is true. And whatever we did it with, our company is called Integra. We did it with integrity. We hustle with integrity. So, we're not going to cut corners, but we're going to work really hard. And I think that we're not, I can't say I'm smarter than anyone, but I certainly have a work ethic that was instilled by my dad. My brother has it as well, and we just work, And
That's great. And it's obviously you had a partner through all of this, and he contributed more on the operational side because you'd be bringing the business in. He would be running the operations, making sure the, staff was, hiring, firing, those types of things.
We did. So I wasn't a partner with him initially. I actually was a solo guy the first year or year and a half, and our paths crossed, and when we went to dinner, and we had very similar situations. Actually, he was a chiropractor as well that had gotten out of it, and I was, and so we both were very similar. But I had different skills than he did. He was more operational, and I was more visionary and strategy and other things of that. And we meshed very well together. And it worked out great. We've been partners and friends for 30 odd years now. We're no longer partners since 2014. In anything, and just to kind of give you, when we got to our 40s after success, and we'll go back to that, we were successful enough that he didn't want to work that hard.
Okay.
And there's no rule that says you have to continue to grind forever. I was still in the grinding mode. I wanted more, not just more money. I had more mountains to climb, more things that interested me. And he was in a different mode at that time.
Got it.
And so when you're sharing everything and you're both working equally hard, it's perfect. But after a little while, maybe a year or two, where I could see that he wasn't, going at the same pace that I was, it became a little bit of an inequality. And we sat down as two friends, men, and we worked it out. And I said, listen, we're going to continue to own the things that we owned prior to today or whenever, as we have, and we've done that, except that I left the band and I became a solo artist, kind of like Sting leaving the Police or something, And so I've had my solo career since 2014, about 10 years now. And everything I've done since 2014 has been just as a solo artist.
Got it. Okay. But you still share the partnership on the older assets and the ongoing businesses.
100%. Everything that we had prior to 2014, we're full partners exactly the same way we were.
Amazing.
That's great.
And how quick did you scale up to those 10 locations?
Well, actually, I kind of glossed over it. So what happened was I think when I met him, I had 3. Okay. I met him, he had 3. So we became 6 the minute we became partners. And then we added 4 or 5 more as partners. So that's how I got from 3 to 11 or 12 that quickly.
Okay. Easier to scale when you have synergies and you're able to.
For sure.
Yeah.
He also had, this goes back to the reasons that I partnered with him, besides having skill sets that were different than mine. He also I was concerned at that time, this is a chiropractic conversation or a medical conversation. There's, in this state of Florida, you probably see all the billboards for, injury attorneys. 411 pain is the biggest out there, but there's, whatever, so many, it's not even funny. But they were talking about getting rid of personal injury protection, which is a very big part of any medical provider's income. Obviously, all these lawyers and all these doctors are going to that, and so this partner had clinics outside of the state of Florida, and I liked the idea of partnering with him because it got me exposure.
Diversity.
If all of your eggs are in the Florida basket and they change that law
overnight, you
literally could be without a business.
Yeah.
And by having the exposure elsewhere, it gave me strategically peace of mind that law change or no law change, I'll be okay.
Is that the primary reason you made the decision to do that? Because I'm guessing if you had 3 locations, you couldn't be at every location. So you had people working for you at the time, chiropractors working for you.
After 18 months of being in practice, I never saw another patient. So I was never in any of those 3 locations. I was never the treating doctor.
Got it.
You know what I mean? I was out of the day-to-day actual practice from the first location. I hired a guy, and that's what allowed me to see in my first location, I got so busy I couldn't see patients. That's what happened.
Yeah.
I got so busy running the business that then I brought in some younger guy. I was like 29, so he was 27, and I'm like, hey, do me a favor, you see the patients.
But that's a sign of success, and you're doing something right.
One of the, like you mentioned, cash flow quadrants, right? And there's the 4 quadrants, right? And there's the small business owner, there's the big business owner, and you transitioned pretty quickly into that big business owner by removing yourself.
So in the book, very good, by the way. So that was the second thing that I took away, besides the getting out of the rat race aspect from Robert Kiyosaki's book. The second thing was this quadrant that he had designed, which he made a whole other book of. And it had, if you can picture it, the plus sign. Top left-hand corner is a letter E, which stands for an employee. And it's tough to get ahead when you're the employee, really, unless you're the center fielder for the New York Yankees employee.
Exactly.
Back to my original comment of people trying to get into real estate and they're making $65,000 a year. I mean, it's a challenge.
It is a challenge.
It's a challenge.
You know, there are ways, but you've got to be more creative in those early things, and you've got to bring in other people. I think in terms of getting the money is the hardest thing typically.
But actually, I would say eventually you get out of that E. That's like, even if you're in the E phase, you're working to get out of it, no matter what. Like,
there's almost no government tax benefits to being an E. You get taxed at the highest amount, then you have to spend all the dollars after taxes. Whereas if you're in an S, which is the next below the E on the plus sign, and the government wants you to be an S. They want you to have small businesses. In aggregate, small business owners have way more employees than even the largest companies of our country. I mean, I'm talking in 2s and 3s and 4s.
Sure. Yep.
And so being an S is better than being an E. But being an S, which is a small business owner, means you got to go to work every day. You're there, and the money that you earn is derived from you being there. Mm-hmm. It limits you to some extent because you got to be there.
Sure.
And then what he was saying is making that shift from S to B, and B is simply the difference between a small business owner and a big business owner. And a big business owner is able to work on their business, not in the business. That was the transition. And I definitely have somewhere in my notes from 2001, or it was S to B. That was a very big thing for me.
That's a big thing for me right now. You guys have done it well. Jaron's done it pretty well. It's just that's the transition is sometimes it's hard.
You've done it in such a quick time frame. You've been a realtor how long now?
So I've had my license since 2010, but I've been active since January 2019.
That's amazing. So 5 years, and you have how many people on your team now?
We have about 13-ish people.
It's amazing.
Staff.
I did 110 or so transactions last year. That's awesome.
But most of
you've transitioned to Big B. I don't know the exact time. But
I don't know if I'd define it as
Big B. He's large, small B in my opinion. Is probably how I would define it.
Most people work in order to do that 110. That's all me doing that, or most of that, right? So I haven't, like, you had a doctor that filled your previous role. I haven't had another broker that's been able to fill, or realtor that's been able to fill the role, so I can continue to work. I'm still servicing those clients.
If you went away for 6 months, your production would be completely different.
Yeah.
And that's almost the way to distinguish or to judge whether or not you've been able to transition well.
Exactly.
But that should be your, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but that should, that would be the evolution of it. You grow your S to a certain size, and then you see that you can only go so far.
Yep.
And frankly, your personal life, your lifestyle will dictate some things as you start to have families, as you get older and don't have the energy you might have had in your younger days. You start to say, wow, I need to come up with some strategies to plan for the future, so I can take some time off.
Yeah.
There is one other quadrant that we didn't mention, which is the bottom right-hand corner, which is an I, which you can and should do from any of those other three. The E, the S, and the B are all able to be an I. And an I is simply an investor. And an investor is simply someone that knows and understands investments, so they're constantly reading and up to date with what's going on in the world, whether it be stocks, bonds, in this day and age, cryptocurrencies, things of that nature, and just understanding business, which is a lifelong pursuit, really. Yeah. And to some extent, I think so. At the end of the day, you want to be on the right-hand side of that quadrant, which is a B and an I, and that's really the goal.
And I think some people think it just what you said there. It has to be all or nothing. So someone has to go directly from employee to investor full time, but it doesn't have to be. Can it be that? It could be. It's a difficult lift to go if you don't have capital to go directly into a full time investor. We've seen some wholesalers. We had Jose on here recently and Tito, who are great wholesalers and flippers, and they made that transition from fireman, and he was an engineer, I believe. And,
exactly.
And I would say that's one example, and they're successful, and they're doing good volume. In fact, I'm doing a couple deals with them. But
so their wholesaling business, while it's right next to their investing business, because it's like almost one and the same thing, they're generating cash from the wholesaling business, so that is their business. That's their S quadrant.
It's kind of a hybrid possibly.
And then they're taking the deals that make sense to invest in.
It depends on the deal. You're right.
Right.
To create long-term passive investment. So you're right.
But you need to generate cash. That goes back to even their model is like, we got to make money somehow to go ahead and do deals.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people think the I quadrant is, I'll make the money in the I quadrant. I'll generate the cash, which is very, very hard to do without having cash up front.
I think, again, I'm speaking Robert Kiyosaki's words, which I happen to agree with, is that the I is actually can and should be done from all three of those things. But if you're an employee, you should be learning about business and learning about investments. If you're a small business owner, you should be learning about investments. And if you're a big business owner, obviously you probably already do know it, but at the same time, continually learning. You don't just get it in a day. It's a constant evolution. You might study something for a long time and then get this idea, a year down the road that, this is how I should do it. You know?
Yeah, makes sense. So circling back, you bought several clinics. Then you mentioned that you had a mobile home park. That's very interesting. Was that your first investment and foray outside of the chiropractor office space, or?
No, what happened with me was I was in the chiropractic mode, or let's call it health clinic, because it was really more than medical clinic, whatever the word. But I was in that mode, and I went to go buy a clinic from an older retiring doctor. I wanted to buy his building. I wanted to buy his practice. It was up in an area called Port St. Lucie. This is 2002, 2003, I forgot exactly when it was, but this area was growing like mad. And at that time, prior to the crash, areas like Port St. Lucie were just going like gangbusters.
Sure.
And then, of course, when the crash came, it hit a big speed bump. But it brought me up there, and this is before the days of having an iPhone and a map on your phone and all. This was back to the old days of pulling out a map.
MapQuest, or you're printing on MapQuest on your printer, or whatever.
Exactly. And so I ended up going there, and we didn't strike a deal, but it got me up there, got me up into that world. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, I just had the day off. I worked for myself. I just decided to start kind of looking around, and I went to an area called, this is Treasure Coast. This is about an hour or so, a little further than an hour north of where we are right now. Mm-hmm. And I ended up I was in Port St. Lucie. I went to a place called Fort Pierce, which is a little bit right near it, a little bit north.
St. Lucie County.
And then I went a little bit north of that to Vero Beach. And when I got to Vero, I really liked it. It was just had a lot of things that I'd been there once before as a kid, so I kind of had one thing. But I ended up just going to meet a broker. He was a very intelligent guy, older man, Harvard trained, and I taught him Carlton Sheets 1%. I swear to God I did. I said to him,
"Give me your CDs." Yeah.
No, I just explained the thing to him. He picked it up in 2 seconds.
Sure,
it's a very easy concept.
Yeah, of course.
And I said, Ron, do me a favor. If you see anything, and this guy's a broker, he's out there hustling, trying to sell deals, and I'm a fairly successful young guy. You find me properties that meet the 1% rule, and a week later, hey, Michael, I got an 8-plex. And I bought it. Nice. Because it met the 1% rule.
Awesome.
I paid $400,000 for it, and each unit brought in, if you think about 8 units, you have to bring in $500 a month per unit to bring in $4,000 a month, and it was bringing in $500. So, it was that.
That's great.
Next, Michael, I got a mobile home park. Oh yeah, tell me about it, and there's 13 units, and you own 10 of them, and the people own 3 of them. Like, they just pay for what's called the ground.
And I learned. What is that? What's that? A ballpark?
So when you buy a mobile home park.
A mobile home park. Sorry.
A mobile home park. So this thing, but there was 13, and this is a low-end mobile home park.
Okay.
I paid $250,000 for this thing.
Okay.
Okay.